The City of Bloomington Board of Zoning Appeals for February the 15th, 2018. Carmen, can you please call the roll?
Here.
Manis. Here. Clapper.
Here. We do have minutes to be approved, but we are going to hold on those until such time that we have somebody present who was also at that meeting. Reports, resolutions, and communications. I will entertain a motion to suspend the rules to appoint officers until which time we have more representation on the board.
So moved.
Can I have a second?
Second.
Okay, can I have a,
Yes. McManus.
say yes?
Yes. Clapper.
Yes.
Rockmore.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And then there is the conflict of interest questionnaire.
So hopefully you all received a conflict of interest questionnaire. I know some have submitted. I don't know if you all have. Those need to be submitted directly to Barbara McKinney in the legal department. And if you don't submit them by next Monday, I will just email you a reminder. And we'd like to have them all in by that time if possible.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
And I'd like to recognize that Beth McManus is joining the board, so welcome this evening.
Thank you.
And we didn't have a chance to say at the last meeting, but I just wanted to say just a brief word about Sue Akila's service for such a long time on the board, and she was a wonderful leader. She would very much be missed. And Joe Hoffman, who always had sage advice and insights, he also will very much be missed for his long service on this board. Okay, so to the petitions this evening, we had two on the agenda. Do I list both of them, even though one of them has been?
Yeah, so I guess I can say, sorry, I'm not quite sure but V3717.
Dwellings? LLC?
Yes, on West Allen Street, has been continued to next month. They asked for a continuance since we don't have a full board.
Okay.
So that will be continued. If there's anyone here to see that one, it won't be up till next month.
Okay, so we have one petition to be heard tonight, CU/V-01-18, Carol and David McKay. Can we please have the
Great,
staff
sure.
report?
Okay, good evening. So our petition tonight is for a property located at 506.
I'm sorry, but
Oh,
are we going to have these TVs on so we can see?
we may only have these two TVs
All right.
tonight, Joe, sorry. Before you got here, we only had these four, and now it has switched
Okay.
for some reason. I'm hesitant to try to fix it.
All right.
Thanks for asking. Sorry about that. The property is on the east side of town, 506 South High Street. And the petition site is .77 acres in the residential core zoning district, and the GPP designation is also core residential. There is a single-family house and one accessory structure on the south side of the property, you can see there, and the surrounding uses are single-family and then institutional across the street. The request before you tonight is for a conditional use approval for an accessory dwelling unit. So the accessory dwelling unit is existing in the detached garage as a legal non-conforming unit. It meets almost all of the development standards from the new accessory dwelling unit rules that were passed by City Council in September of last year. So accessory dwelling units were added to the zoning code in single-family residential neighborhoods and signed into law in October. And then particular development standards criteria were added to those. And so this pre-existing site, which does have legal nonconforming status as is, meets all of the standards except for one. So they're also requesting a variance from the side yard setback for the western property line. So they, because the property has two street frontages to the north and east, the other property lines are held to the side yard setback standard, which is 5 feet. So it meets on the south end and does not meet on the west side, but is immediately adjacent to an unimproved alley. So this is a view from High Street, the house here in front, and then you can see in the red circle what you can see of the accessory garage in the back. and that is where the unit is located. So I'm going to briefly go over some of the standards since we haven't had any accessory dwelling units yet. This is the first one coming through, and what the standards are, and then what the conditions are on this property. So the maximum number of accessory dwelling units per lot is 1, and there is 1 on this property, and only 1 family, as defined by code, can live in the unit, and that is the case here. The property has to meet the minimum lot size for the zoning district in order to be able to have an accessory dwelling unit, and the minimum lot size in RC is 7,200 square feet, and this property is quite a bit bigger than that at over 33,000 square feet. And again, because this is the first accessory dwelling unit, the separation requirement from other ADUs that might be asked to consider in the future is a moot point. Owner occupancy on the lot is required, and the owner of this parcel does live in the main house. So some of the design standards include a maximum square footage requirement. That's different for an attached or a detached accessory dwelling unit, but for a detached ADU, it's 440 square feet, and this property is just at or under that, actually. And then a maximum number of bedrooms is 1, and again, this unit meets that requirement. So the setbacks is where the variance request lies. Front yard setback, the requirement is that the accessory dwelling unit has to have the same setback as the main house. In this particular case, it's obviously set quite a bit farther to the west than the house. And the 2 side yard setbacks are 5 feet each, so 5 feet from the southern line and 5 feet from the western line. They meet the standard at the southern line, but along the western line, it appears that the existing accessory structure is pretty much right on the property line. So they do not meet the 5 feet there. And then maximum height is 25 feet tall, and this property is under 19 feet. So just kind of a zoom in here of the aerial of the site, and you can see the green line that kind of runs along the western part of the garage, and then it's immediately adjacent to a 12-foot unimproved alley. And then what kind of looks like an alley to the south is actually owned by the petitioner. It's just a separate little sliver. So they do meet the setback there. So staff has been working with petitioner to get this all set for you to see tonight, and we have been kind of analyzing this, especially as the first ADU, and wanting to make sure it meets the spirit of what the ADU is trying to allow for people to be able to develop these in the single-family zones. And so we think that this was a good candidate, and especially as an existing unit. So we found no adverse impacts, and we found multiple peculiar conditions, mostly related to age of development and size of the lot. You know, the property, or the development on the property has been there since, I believe, before the 30s. It's pretty, yeah, the garage has been in its current configuration and location since at least 1928, and the legal nonconforming unit has been in continuous operation since at least 1989. The parcel far exceeds the minimum lot size for the RC zoning district, so theoretically could be subdivided to have more than 1 primary structure. And so an accessory dwelling unit meeting the accessory dwelling unit size requirements we felt is appropriate. Holding the addition to the side yard setback doesn't seem to meet the intended purpose of the UDO regulation, as there is existing separation from the closest neighbor because of the way the properties have developed, and because of the unimproved alley. A couple things I wanted to mention. The department is recommending that the BZA adopt the findings in your packet and approve CUV 0118 with 3 conditions. The first condition being that the conditional use is approved for the existing accessory dwelling unit with existing dimensions, so no expansion of the dwelling unit would be allowed because they're already at the maximum size. And the second and third conditions are basically enumerating requirements from code in the conditional use section for this particular use. So the petitioner shall record a commitment to satisfy 2005 0333L, indicating that the ADU cannot be sold separately from the primary unit, and that the conditional use approval shall only be in effect as long as the owner of record occupies either the house or the ADU, and that if the ADU approval is revoked, then the ADU must be removed from the property. So the actual code goes on to say this can include but is not limited to removal of any second kitchen on the lot, including all kitchen appliances and cabinets. So that's something we just kind of wanted to clarify. That's pretty common if you have an illegal unit on your lot. That is a way to rectify that situation. It's basically taking out the second kitchen, and so that would be something that they might have to do if they were to leave the property. And then the third condition is that the petitioner shall submit a copy of the property tax homestead exemption, basically as proof that they do live there on the site. And so those, again, are both commitments that are actually directly from code, that we just wanted to spell out, make sure that everyone understood that those would be required. So I can answer any questions.
Thank you. Petitioner's representative? Please state your name.
I'm Jim Rosenbarger.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
You have 20 minutes to present your petition.
I don't know if I need to say a lot. I think we've covered most elements in the petitioner's statement. For me, it's very positive that this has been something that's been occupied for some time, no problems. There's a very happy tenant. They've had several tenants over the years. It's in some ways, I think, a good kickoff for an ADU conditional use, because it does show, I think, a successful use of an ADU over time. It's in a historic, the house is historic, and the carriage house is very similar to the house. The interior of the ADU has a lot of the similar kind of details. So it's a historic building, but it's also a historic use. I think that, like I say, I think that's a positive thing. It's been noted that the lot is very large. Another factor is discussed is the fact it's on an arterial street. It's on the very edge of an RC district. I think there's some language in the RC section of if you are going to do something different in the RC area, putting it on the edge of the district is one sensible location. So the zoning, it changes across the street into institutional. See if there's something else that might want to be. I think it's pretty well covered. Yeah, it's a beautiful setup. We're just asking to make it to get out from under the legal but non-conforming. Any questions?
Thank you. Questions for staff or petitioner by the board?
To the staff, please. So first, I just want to make clear, because this is the first ADU that we've heard. So based on what was passed by City Council, if this particular property had conformed to all of the regulations, we would not be hearing this, correct?
You would still be hearing it.
Okay.
You would just be the conditional use approval only without the accompanying variance.
So in the future, all ADUs will come before the BZA,
Yes.
even
that-
if it meets all requirements?
Yes,
Okay.
there were multiple proposals, but the one where you'll see them all, at least for now, is what was finally passed, yes.
Okay. And right now, in terms of, aside from that fact, right now what's non-conforming, if I read this right, is that the west and rear setback is non-conforming.
Correct.
Could you go over the unimproved alley adjacent? What's the significance of that in terms of the code?
Sure. So the reason that we point it out is that part of what the code is getting after by including the setback requirement is separation from the property, the adjacent property. So if you have a 5-foot setback on your property and so does your neighbor, then you're going to be at least 10 feet apart. In this situation, this unimproved alley is 12 feet wide. So even if the neighbor, at some point wanted to build back here, they would have to meet current setbacks since it's a new building. So that would be 5 feet plus the 12, so it would be 17 feet apart at least. And so it would be meeting from this building. Does that make sense?
It'd be 22 feet, 5, 12, and 5.
Well, this building doesn't meet, right, this is at 0, so plus the 12 plus the 5. In this particular case, it would be a separation of 17 feet if someone developed on the property next door, which gets to the spirit of the separation of setback requirements,
Yeah, I understand.
is what I am trying to get at.
Okay, and then the last thing is because this is the first of what will probably be many, I just want to verify with the staff that petitions brought before the BZA are not setting precedent.
Correct.
They are all decided on an individual basis, correct?
Correct.
All right, so approving or not approving any single ADU does not set in motion some type of standard.
Correct.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Beth, do you have any questions? Any questions? A question for staff. So what is prompting, in this case, the need for
Oh,
the
thank you.
change?
Good question. Okay, so I wrote that here. Why are they requesting this? So
Yeah.
this legal nonconforming use could go on in perpetuity, but it holds the property kind of in a freeze zone where, because the property is nonconforming, they can't do other expansions. So
Okay.
if they wanted to do a small addition on their house, they can't do it
Okay.
with the unit under its current legal nonconforming status, the way that the ordinance is currently written. So if they bring the unit up to current code requirements, then the
Then
whole
they can
property
move
is
forward
conforming.
with other improvements. Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, so anybody in the public here who would like to comment on this petition? Seeing none, any final comments from the petitioner? You have time remaining.
Mr. McKay brought up this question earlier today, and this refers to something that Jackie read over. It's recommendation 2. The last sentence is, if the ADU approval is revoked at any time, the ADU must be removed from the property. That sounds, if you sort of interpreted that in a very strict way, it almost sounds like there could be a bulldozer coming down the driveway. What I think we're most concerned, though, is how it would be revoked and under what conditions. And in a conversation with Jackie, it sounded like that essentially would be a situation where the owners decide to move and to leave the property. So I guess unless they started having a lot of parties or something there, and a lot of neighbors complain, but they have a great track record. So that was just, I thought, a legitimate question for Mr. McKay to ask about how could that be revoked, what would happen. That's a sort of an open question. Would you confirm that sort of the most likely condition is they would move?
Yeah, is that okay if I?
Yes, please.
Okay, so, yes, so the way that it reads in the ordinance says, if at any time the conditional use approval is revoked or is no longer in effect, the ADU must be removed from the property, and then the sentence about the second kitchen. So I think the most likely scenario for having it be revoked would be if they were to leave the property, and for example, someone whose primary residence is somewhere else bought the property, then the ADU can no longer be used under this approval, because the owner of the property has to live on the property under our current ADU rules.
Right. And so just as a point of clarification, the cooking appliances would have to be removed.
Right. So it's not, and Mr. Rosenberger and I talked about this a little, it's not saying, and I understand the concern, it's not saying that if they were to sell this property, someone's gonna have to tear the garage down.
Right.
It is more specifically saying that, that the way that we describe residential units having to do with fixtures inside the unit, that those fixtures would most likely have to be changed. That would be that's usually the fix that we have. So we just want to get that on the record.
Thanks for the clarification.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Okay. Back to the board for action.
Can I ask one more question?
Yeah, please, by our discussion,
One question for
sure.
staff, please. Can the neighbor petition for revocation of this ADU permit? You were saying that one of the most likely ways would be, the most obvious way, and the reason that the ordinance was written this way was so if someone moves and they're no longer the primary owner of the residence. But at the same time, I just want to make sure we're clear, would the neighbor be able to petition for a revocation?
There's not a specific revocation process for ADUs, so whatever the legal process is for remonstrating against a variance, which I'm not sure, that might actually be a court process. That would be what they would go through. We do not have a specific one. I don't know if Mr. Desmond knows the answer to that question. I think that it would actually be a civil, or that would actually have to go through the courts if a neighbor wanted to
Seek to
file a
revoke.
remonstrance against a decision, yes.
And the only reason I ask is because the decision of the BZA should suffice
Yes.
for that variance, but because of this new policy, I just want to make sure we're kind of clear
Sure.
on the first couple that we do.
Sure.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Any comments?
Do you have any comments or questions? Okay. I will entertain a motion.
I move for approval of CU/V 0118 as recommended by staff.
Okay. Second?
Second.
Okay. Carmen, could you please call roll?
McManus? Okay, yes. Clapper?
Yes.
Throckmorton?
Yes.
Okay, the motion is passed. Petition is granted. Thank you very much, and we are adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.